Hey guys, it's Jack. I wanted to let you know that we're starting a new push for subscriptions here on Human Events Daily. So make sure that when you're listening to this podcast, you hit subscribe, you download it, and you share it with 5 of your friends. Make sure they're all going and downloading as well, because we need to get the signal out as much as possible. Look, we've done so much over the past couple of years since this show started, and we're only going to do so much more. Let's get it. This is what happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king.
And right now we are getting this breaking news that's coming in from Axios. It says, scoop, U.S. and Iran reach deal but need Trump's final approval. That is according to 2 U.S. officials and a regional source involved in the mediation efforts, speaking there with Barack Ravid over at Axios. So again, that's just coming in. And of course, we'll see how that all plays out.
Well, welcome to Human Events Daily. I am Bo Davidson, filling in momentarily for Jack as he is currently in the White House press briefing room. He's awaiting a briefing by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. So we will be sure to get you to that in just a few moments as Scott goes live. But we do have some breaking news that you saw during the cold open regarding the Iran war. And this regards a memo of understanding, that's otherwise known as an MOU. That's what we're talking about when we talk about memo of understanding. And I want to give you the details to this because this has been breaking over the past 24 hours. And we want to make sure that our Human Events Daily audience is informed. So here are just some of the overview bullet points. The United States and Iranian negotiators have reached an agreement on a 60-day memorandum of understanding to extend the ceasefire and launch negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. But President Trump has yet to give his final approval. This is according to 2 U.S. officials and a regional source involved in the mediation, according to Axios. That's who you saw in the cold open there. So President Trump has not given his final approval on this. My understanding is that he needs a couple days to think about this. But this is a groundbreaking component as we move towards the path towards peace. Now, the MOU would be the most significant breakthrough since the start of the conflict in Iran. So that's why this is momentous. Everything relies on whether this MOU actually takes place, and we do have a 60-day ceasefire. It is said that the MOU is what gets the parties to the table. This is this just initial catalyst to get the 2 parties to the negotiating table. The devil, as they say, is in the details. And those are still, of course, to be negotiated. So this is just the catalyst, that tinderbox that allows these 2 parties, the U.S. and the Iranian regime, to come together and begin talking. Now, the U.S. officials claim the Iranians later came back and said that they had the necessary approvals and were prepared to sign this MOU. Iran has not confirmed that. And, of course, this is according to Axios. The U.S. negotiators briefed President Trump on the details of the final deal, but he did not immediately sign off. So that's still pending. There's a quote here that says the president relayed to the mediators that he wants a couple of days to think about it, as I mentioned earlier. So we don't think that President Trump is going to immediately say yes to this. He's going to need a couple days to think about it. And this all, of course, plays into the art of the deal, which we will get into in a moment. But this is the guy you want in the room. Of course, this is who's championing our cause for the plight of America and for the world. As he said, he's not just doing it for the United States. He's doing this for peace in the world. Now, U.S. officials said the 60-day MOU will state that shipping through the Strait of Hormuz will be, quote, unrestricted. The U.S. officials said this means no tolls and no harassment, and that Iran will have to remove all mines from the strait within 30 days. The U.S. naval blockade will also be lifted, but, and this is an important component here, folks, that will happen in proportion to the restoration of commercial shipping. That's what the U.S. officials said. So remember, that blockade will be removed in proportion to the amount of shipping that comes through that strait, which I think is a smart component of this MOU. The MOU will include an Iranian commitment not to pursue a nuclear weapon. That's point number 1. It will also state that the first issues to be negotiated during this 60-day window will be how to dispose of Iran's highly enriched uranium and how to address Iranian enrichment. The U.S. will commit to discuss sanctions relief and the release of frozen Iranian funds as part of the negotiations. The memorandum of understanding will also include a discussion of a mechanism to help Iran start receiving goods and humanitarian aid. Of course, Scott Bessent has mentioned that their economy has pretty much been choked off, that it's in a free fall. I'm sure that Scott will address that shortly as his press briefing gets underway. Now, U.S. officials also claim that there will be no side deals or secret clauses about sanctions relief or funds going towards Iran. The quote is, "The more the Iranians are willing to give, the more they will get." Now, in the past 48 hours, there have been 2 skirmishes. The U.S., of course, shot down drones over the Strait of Hormuz. And this was breaking overnight. Iran launched a ballistic missile on Kuwait. And that was intercepted, of course. But again, this is all part of the art of the deal. You know the book that President Trump wrote. This is the guy that you want in the room where it happens, as the song goes from the show Hamilton. Now, I want the Human Events Daily audience to understand and think about the alternative to this. If Kamala Harris had become president, for instance, can you imagine the disaster that this would be in these negotiations if Kamala Harris were in these negotiations, or anyone actually from a previous Democratic administration? You think about Barack Obama. You think about the terrible JPCOA that was created from that. That was an awful deal. And President Trump has reiterated this over and over and over again, how bad that deal was, that we got nothing out of it. We give them loads of cash, and bam, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Iran has all kinds of money. They're able to fund their terrorist proxies. And now we're in the situation that we're in right now. So President Trump has changed that. He's wiped the slate clean. We have Marco Rubio. We have J.D. Vance, some real heavy hitters. And, you know, both parties are probably going to walk away a little unhappy about this. But hopefully, Iran will be less happy about it than we will be. So that's the facts that are on the slate today. We are awaiting Jack Posobiec, who is in that press briefing with Scott Bessent. And we're going to take a break right now, and we will be right back with more Human Events Daily.
Stand in our way, and our golden age has just begun.
This is Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Now it's time for everyone to understand what America First truly means.
Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, welcome back to Human Events Daily. We are awaiting a briefing by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Jack is there right now. Of course, Scott Bessent will be delivering remarks on the economy, talking about, I know it's been rocky for a lot of people. You're paying at the pump. We acknowledge that. We understand that. I've done it myself. It ain't pretty, but the economy, there are signs of improvement. And he's also going to talk through the launch of the Trump Account app. So we want to take you right now to that, where Jack Posobiec is. Here is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
So I don't want anyone yelling, reclaim my time. So let's start out with Trump accounts. Trump accounts, I believe, are the most important benefit for young people since the GI Bill. Today, the app is now available on all major platforms, bringing the president's vision directly to American homes. Nearly 6 million American children have been signed up for Trump accounts, which will launch on July 4th. And I would encourage all of you to go to trumpaccount.gov to sign up. We had a historic tax filing season. We passed the largest tax cuts in American history. The average refund this filing season is nearly $3,300, an 11% increase from last year. And importantly, very importantly, 62 million returns, 44% claimed at least one of the president's signature tax cuts. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. The reduced taxes on Social Security benefits. 85% of our seniors paid no taxes, and the auto deductibility on loans for American cars. And to remind everyone, Democrats, every Democrat voted against those programs. We've had sustained and resilient GDP growth. Real GDP has risen 2.6% over the past 4 quarters. Atlanta Fed's GDP now predicts 3.8% for this second quarter. The U.S. energy dominance, part of our resilience stems from our energy dominance. Natural gas is down. It's my belief and the futures market is showing us oil will be lower than pre-conflict levels. We are more resilient to energy price fluctuations due to President Trump's energy dominance and deregulatory agenda. The United States is now the world's largest energy exporter. The United States has never exported so much energy or produced so much energy. Main Street prosperity, the average 401k is up almost $30,000 since President Trump's inauguration. President Trump RX has already saved Americans over $600 million. I'm sure all of you will want to report on that. And the unemployment rate remains low at 4.3%. So with that, I'm happy to ask questions. I will mention 3 weeks ago, I got an honorary degree from the University of South Carolina. So if you really want to get a question, you can call me Dr. Besson. So,
I want to start with these Trump accounts. You know, there's a lot of people, a lot of working class Americans that maybe don't have the financial expertise when it comes to stock markets and investing in general. In what ways are you guys simplifying this for all those Americans so that it's not just for one class of people, but all Americans can have it?
Well, that's a great question, because 38% of Americans have no exposure to equities. They don't share in the great innovation, the machine that is the American economy. Our great capital markets drives our prosperity. So if your child is born during President Trump's administration, Treasury puts in $1,000 as a seed investment. We've also created 6 learning pods, so you can go online to the app that went up today and learn. And I think that this is going to be, I've been a big proponent of financial literacy, and I think this is going to be one of the greatest real-time financial literacy educations in history, because it won't be, there's a street in New York called Wall Street. This is what I don't really understand what happens there. American family is going to be able to look on their phone every day and see, and I think it's going to drive people to try to understand what they've got here. I think we're going to create a generation of shareholders. So, Ed?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I guess first, well, we're starting to see the disruption of the oil supply and through the Strait of Hormuz affect economic data. First, is there a deal on the table for a 60-day ceasefire to continue that? And then second, how fast could inflation then recede or retreat, or is inflation sticky? Because the PCE was at a 3-year high.
Well, first of all, PCE today, month over month, was 0.2, which was, we're looking at decimal points, but the estimate was 0.3. So 1 month doesn't a trend make. And what we've seen is actually oil prices are down about 10% in May. There are almost 2,000 ships waiting to come out of the Gulf. And I think the oil market is going to be very well supplied on the other side of this, and that we could see prices come down very quickly. We saw the UAE leave OPEC. So I would expect on the other side of this that gasoline prices will follow.
Is there an agreement on the table?
Sorry?
Is there an agreement with Iran on the table?
The teams have been going back and forth. And President Trump has made it very clear, he talked about it at the cabinet meeting, that he has several red lines. And Iran has to turn over their highly enriched uranium. They cannot pursue a nuclear weapon. And the Strait of Hormuz, back to your question on energy, has to free transit. Navigation of the seas has to be free and open as it was before. So he's not going to take a bad deal. He's going to make a great deal for the American people. So, Peter?
Thank you, Dr. Besson.
Yep.
How long until we see your signature next to President Trump's face on a $250 bill?
Well, again, as Treasury Secretary, I have 2 mandates for U.S. currency. At present, no living person can be on U.S. currency, and the currency must say, "In God we trust." So right now there is proposed legislation in front of the House, in front of the Senate, to change the first requirement so that a living person, Donald J. Trump, could be on a $250 bill. So it's all in the hands of the, it's all up on Capitol Hill. So at Treasury, we prepare things in advance. So we have prepared in advance that if the legislation is passed, but we will stick to the law.
And something that came up yesterday also at the cabinet meeting, President Trump said, Oman will behave just like everybody else, or we will have to blow them up. Are you guys back there in the West Wing making plans for a new war with Oman?
Again, I think the president wanted to punctuate freedom of navigation in the strait. I had a call with the Omani ambassador this morning, and he assured me that there were no plans for tolling the strait. As he said, our countries have had 200 years of good relations. He wants to have another 200 more. And I told him that this was a non-starter, and he did not want to risk either the Omani individuals or Omani financial institutions getting sanctioned.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Is it in the U.S. interest to waive some sanctions on Iran or to unfreeze some of their assets before Iran has made concrete promises about getting rid of their nuclear program?
Again, I'm not going to preview the deal, but I would think that the things would go very slowly in terms of that. So we'll see.
Just to follow up on that, because it's our understanding that the U.S. has committed to discussing the matter of sanctions relief during this negotiation period. So just to be clear, is sanctions relief for Iran on the table?
Again, it is a multifaceted agreement, and nothing is going to be on the table until we see the Strait of Hormuz open and the Iranians agree that they have to turn over the highly enriched uranium and that they can't have a nuclear program. And to be clear here, that this administration, President Trump, has done something that no other administration is able to do. We have gotten the Iranians to talk about their nuclear program and to perhaps commit to not having one. That has never happened before. It had been off the table. So I think when you look at the results of the kinetic action of our economic pressure, it has worked to bring them to the table and have a discussion on this.
Mr. Secretary, I just want to follow up. You said that the teams have been going back and forth, but can you confirm whether or not a tentative agreement has been reached in these negotiations with Iran?
Again, everything depends on what the president wants to do, and President Trump is not going to make a bad deal for the American people, for the U.S., and he was very clear at the cabinet meeting on the yesterday what he wants.
Secretary, Kara from Lindell TV. I'm sorry, did I steal his question? Because I'm not that person.
No, it's you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for taking my question, Kara from Lindell TV. I really wanted to get your thoughts on digital currency. A lot of our viewers are increasingly worried that digital currency could one day be used to track people's spending or limit personal freedom. What's your philosophy on that, and what safeguards is the Treasury and its administration putting in place to make sure new digital payment systems protect Americans' privacy and freedoms in the future?
Well, so this administration has been very clear. There will be no central bank digital currency, which I think would be the first step toward tracking. So we have taken that off the table. We passed stablecoin legislation, with bipartisan, and the Clarity Act is now up on the Hill, and I think it has bipartisan support. And the most important thing we can do is to make digital assets come into the United States, make the U.S. the home. Our regulation, our best practices are what will ensure good standards for these. When you look at digital assets, all the nonsense that happens, all the things you read about, that's because it's the wild, wild west offshore, so we got to bring it on shore. So I would encourage the House and the Senate to get clarity done. Jack?
A lot of people talking about the IRS settlement, and which has been rolled over now into this weaponization fund over at DOJ. Wanted to get your comment on the decision process, as much as you can tell, how that settlement came to be, how it was rolled over to DOJ, and then the process for those funds now as it's played out.
Good. So thank you for the question. This is going to be the only question I'll take on this matter today. So there's ongoing litigation, so it'd be inappropriate for me to comment. President Trump is a great American who has endured more than 10 years of nonstop harassment and weaponization from the federal and state government actors. A bad actor at the IRS leaked more than 400,000 tax returns, including the Trump family, all the employees, and that's how we got here now. No American should be targeted for political reasons, and every citizen deserves fair treatment and full protection of the law. The Department of Justice represented Treasury and the IRS in this matter, and I'm going to have to refer any questions to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. So.
Thanks. So President Trump has said that we can expect interest rates to come down very quickly. A number of times did that last week. But the market at the moment probably does not expect any rate cuts this year. You know, JP Morgan said this, Morgan Stanley, and so on. So who is right, the president or the market?
Well, I think, again, I believe that we will get through this challenging period now. On higher prices. On the other side of this, I've said publicly that I think we'll be back to substantial disinflation. But most importantly, I think we've got the Warsh Fed now. It's a new day at the Fed. The Treasury Secretary and the Fed Chair have lunch or breakfast every week. I had my first breakfast with Chair Warsh this morning, and I believe that he will do the right thing to balance inflation and growth.
Thank you, Secretary Bessent. I hope you were calling on me.
Yes.
So I'd like to ask you if you could provide a little more detail on what you're doing to shut down Iran's airlines, and also on sanctions relief. A senior administration official briefed reporters over the weekend that sanctions relief will be commensurate with nuclear concessions. But at some point, if the enriched uranium is given up, should we expect pallets of cash to be flown to Iran? Could you describe how that looks?
Well, a couple of things. On the airlines, one thing that we're not going to do is restrict movement for religious reasons. So Iranians who want to make the pilgrimage to Mecca or Medina will be allowed. We will also allow valid humanitarian reasons. But the other thing we can do is that when these airlines fly, they have to be refueled. They sell tickets. They pay landing fees. Anyone who accepts those, we will sanction. So they should be very clear that the state-owned Iranian airlines, they are outlaws and cannot do this.
Secretary.
Since you're the White House briefer today, I know you've been asked this already, but I'm wondering if you can just confirm on the record that there is a tentative deal that has been agreed for a 60-day extension of the ceasefire and then a continuation of nuclear talks.
Again, it's always a mistake to get out ahead of the president, so it is all going to be the president's decision. I think that we can see that the president very clearly stated his three: the open the strait, highly enriched uranium, no nuclear program. So
are those things part of the temporary deal right now, sir? Are those three aspects that you just outlined part of the temporary deal that has been agreed?
That if there can be no deal without those, why would there be a deal without those?
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for taking the time. President Trump at the cabinet meeting said he thought that reducing fraud would help to balance the budget. You put out the goal of getting the deficit to 3% of GDP. What's your timeline for achieving that? And how do you think what can you say to make the markets, given where rates are, like kind of process kind of what your plan and agenda is?
Well, the GAO numbers, not my numbers, believe that there's about $500 billion a year of fraud. So could we very quickly get $250 billion of that? The budget deficit is approximately $1.8 trillion. So that would reduce the deficit substantially. If we could get that $500 billion number, I think it would engender confidence. You'd probably also go into a virtuous cycle. As the budget deficit narrowed, interest rates would go down. No one reports it, but last year we actually had a fiscal contraction. Just to remind everyone, we inherited the worst budget deficit in history when we were not in a recession or not at war, 6.7%. We brought that down to about 5.5 or 5.4% this year. I think we can stay on the good trajectory.
Mr. Secretary, without an executive order, does the U.S. government have adequate defenses in place to address the risk created by Anthropic's new AI models?
We have great collaboration between all of the labs that have the large language models, but between the U.S. government and the labs. So,
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Is me? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it. First, did you speak with the president before this briefing? Did he show any willingness to this 60-day ceasefire extension?
I haven't seen the president today.
And then I just want to follow up. When can Americans, the average American, and can the U.S. economy work for the average American without a deal with Iran?
Again, I believe we've already seen oil prices come down substantially. We are pumping more oil than we've ever seen before. And as I said, these are short-term challenges that we will get over, and I think we'll move forward. So, in the white?
Mr. Secretary, just to follow up.
No, in the white.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it. Given how much this upcoming midterm election will hinge on the economy, what did you think about President Trump's comments in the cabinet meeting yesterday saying he didn't care about the midterms?
So you're calling President Trump a statesman? You're saying that he is taking a statesman-like position, that he has a core belief, and he believes that the most important thing is for Iran never to have a nuclear weapon. So I believe those things can be true, that we can do well in the midterms, that we perhaps have the makings of a deal here, and I believe that, and look, the economy, that it is challenging now, but unemployment is still low, tax refunds were high, and consumer spending is still quite high. So in my private business over the years, I always looked at what were consumers doing, not what they were saying, and I'm in constant contact with the banks, and every income quintile is still doing well. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. On the $250 bill, Mr. Secretary, you said the legalities of it are up on Capitol Hill, but I just wonder what your opinion is personally. Do you think it's a good idea for the president to put his face on America?
Again, the president doesn't do it. The House and the Senate have to do it.
Secretary Bessent, Secretary Bessent, what are the remaining assurances that President Trump needs to see in order for him to sign off on the agreement with Iran?
I don't think it could be clear.
You're following in the footsteps at the podium there of Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance. There's been quite a lot of talk about their possible presidential ambitions. Does your presence here today indicate that we might see you running in 2020?
No, I think it just means they've run out of things on the food chain.
There's been some back and forth over the last several days, and also with the U.S. attacking Iranian drones yesterday. This morning, CENTCOM put out a statement that Iran had launched its ballistic missile towards Kuwait, calling it an egregious ceasefire violation. How can the administration still argue that a ceasefire is in effect?
Again, with the Iranian government, we did not have regime change, but we changed the regime. As President Trump said at the cabinet meeting, as we've said other times, the first layer of leadership was eliminated, the second layer, and we're now at the third layer. And the way to think about it is the Iranian government, such as it is three pillars. It is the elected government, it is the IRGC, and it is the clerics. And they are having trouble communicating. So we are being patient. We do not have unlimited patience. President Trump always prefers a peace deal. So everything we have done thus far has been defensive, and at present, that is what we will continue doing. But if President Trump doesn't think he can get a peace deal, then kinetic is back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are you hopeful that the oil prices will go down once this conflict is over?
given the fact that the Strait of Hormuz remain closed, and by the time this oil gets to the major markets, could be 2 or 3 months.
Again, we see that the market, I believe, is very well supplied right now. The market seems to be going into balance for itself. So I think that as the strait opens up, we're going to see this burst of ships come out. So we may actually see how quickly can it be refined, how quickly can it get to its destination.
Thank you so much, Alina Shirazi from the Daily Mail. You wrote resilience on your cabinet note meetings. Several times the photographer zoomed into it. Are you trying to keep the president calm? Are you trying to keep yourself calm? Why did you write all those notes?
So people could look over my shoulder, photograph them, and think they got a scoop. So,
Is the United States considering a reconstruction program for Iran if a deal is signed?
Again, I think we got to get to the deal before we get to the other side. Before we get to the, you in the pink.
In the red?
No, in the pink.
In the pink, thank you. Cristina Londoño with Telemundo Network. Mr. Secretary, how effective do you believe the current Treasury restrictions have been in pressuring the Cuban government? And also, if you're in the room when those talks are being held, are there any plans to either tighten the sanctions or to ease the sanctions against the Cuban government to get some type of change?
Again, that's going to be up to the Cuban government. That they can go up, they can go down. That we've tried to get humanitarian aid in, and the regime rejected it. So because they wanted to go through their corrupt system. So they could go up, they could go down. It's carrot and stick. Secretary Rubio doing a fantastic job of managing this process, and we at Treasury are working with him. So, in the red.
Reagan Reese with the Daily Caller. I want to ask you about Antifa. In October, the Treasury Department started working with the FBI to investigate who's funding Antifa. Can you give us an update on that investigation? How close are you guys to finding out who's funding Antifa?
It is ongoing. We made substantial progress, and I think in the weeks and months ahead, we're going to have a lot to report. One thing that did go underreported that I would point out to all of you is the IRS is now giving guidance on the Form 990, which nonprofits they have to file. And we are going to encourage or demand that nonprofits know their grant recipients. So if a grant recipient is violent, if they are suppressing people's rights, then you are responsible for that. And I think that's a very good first step. Yep.
There's new government data that shows that Americans are now saving a smaller share of their incomes than at any time over the past 4 years. Are you seeing signs that American households are dipping into their savings to pay for the higher costs of things like gas and groceries? And does data like that concern you right now?
Well, so a lower academic literature would tell you a lower savings rate can mean one of two things. The doomer view that you took, or that people have more confidence, or it could be something else, because for instance, stock market gains or 401k gains might not show up in savings, so they're looking at that, think that they can draw down their household savings.
You're obviously concerned about the risks posed by advanced AI models like Mythos to critical infrastructure. The financial sector is concerned as well. What types of changes are being considered to the AI executive order so it can pass? And do you believe that an AI executive order needs to include the pre-public access for government?
Again, we're working very closely with the large language labs. They've been excellent partners, and we are going to get a solution that solves for the maximum calculus. What we want to do, the U.S. is the AI leader in the world. We're an AI superpower. China is second. They are trailing substantially. We want to make sure that we keep that lead. So we are working on the exact calculus between innovation and safety, and we want to optimize for that. So you in the glasses. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, in the glasses.
Thank you very much.
No, you don't have glasses on. You in the glasses.
Thank you for taking my question. There was a report this morning that Justice Alito's son is working in your department. Can you confirm that that's the case? And if so, do you believe that that means that he should be, that the justice should recuse himself from cases that involve your department?
I am sure that Mr. Alito follows all legal and ethical guidelines, and I can assure you that at Treasury, we follow all the legal and ethical guidelines.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I have two questions for you, but just to follow what you said about the
Well, you didn't call me
$250
doctor, so I only get one.
Well, I'll shoot for two. You said that it's up to Congress. The president's face is on a $250 bill, but it is actually the Washington Post that's reporting two political appointees from the Treasury Department who have asked agencies to be ready to do that. Do you think politically it's a good idea to put his face on a $250 bill when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries?
I don't really understand this Washington Post article. That who hears from the Post? Yep. Terribly written, terribly edited. Because basically what it says is that Treasury is following the law and that we've created the bill and that it's up to Congress, but that we follow the bill and it's up to... I didn't really understand what the story was.
So,
but anyway...
appointees aren't involved in that, two of your political appointees?
Yeah, of course, but we prepare for everything if it gets passed. Just like we were ready 6 months in advance for the one big beautiful bill for tax guidance. So we have to prepare in advance. You can't draw something up the day before.
Politically, do you think it's a good idea though when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries?
Look, I think it has. I think that it's bifurcated. That do you think we should have a 250th anniversary, the celebration?
Well, that's happening anyway. But putting the president's face on a $250 bill is a choice.
But Caitlin, it's not happening anyway. It's happening because it's being funded by private citizens, by the federal government, by state governments, by municipal governments to celebrate our country. And I don't think that there's anything untoward about having the President of the United States, the person who was President of the United States, on the 250th anniversary bill. No.
On Russia sanctions, what you just commented on there, Mr. Secretary, about the $1.8 billion fund. Is it accurate that the General Counsel of the Treasury Department resigned over that?
I will not be taking any other questions. I will not be taking any other questions.
Wall Street over here.
So,
Given the scale of the assault from Russia on Kyiv in recent days and the fact that diplomacy seems to have settled down, there is no diplomatic talks happening right now between Russia, Ukraine, or the U.S. What about sanctions? Is the U.S. considering sanctions on Russia at this time?
Well, the U.S., this administration has put the hardest sanctions on Russia of any country. So let's review how the sanctions regime has gone since the Russian action on Ukraine. Biden administration put on what I would call mild sanctions because they were worried about gasoline prices going up into an election. It would be an unstatesmanlike sanctions. Probably the worst national security advisor in the history of the country, Jake Sullivan, in an act of bravery on his way out the door in January, raised the sanction level on behalf of the Trump administration. We let those in situ when we took office. Fast forward to October, and President Trump instructed me to sanction the two largest Russian oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft, which we did. No other government has done that. So no one has done more sanctions than the Trump administration on Russian oil. Here, who wants to own this? Gray hair. No, gray hair. No, you don't have gray hair. Well, maybe you do.
Yeah. When you had breakfast this morning with Fed Chair, did you request that the Fed lower interest rates?
I had breakfast with Chair Powell 41 times, and I never did that. Okay. Last question.
Thanks, sir. Governor Gavin Newsom has floated this idea of a 100% state tax on Californians who receive money from President Trump's anti-weaponization fund. Your response to the governor's call for 100%?
There's no cure for stupid. Okay. Thank you all.
All right, and that was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, of course, delivering some remarks about the economy, Trump accounts, Iran, and a number of other questions that he fielded. I think the topic of the day, of course, is the Trump account. This is interesting and personal to me because I just had a child about 3 weeks ago who will be eligible for the Trump account. So earlier before this broadcast, I went ahead and downloaded the app. I haven't started it yet, but I just kind of want to show you what it looks like. And you may be able to, guys, if you can zoom in here, I'll hold this as steady as I can. But you can see welcome to Trump accounts. And there's just a little slider here where you can see some of the things that it's going to mention here. Eligible children start with a $1,000 contribution. Money is invested in U.S. companies with a history, and it moves on to contribute up to $5,000 each year to accelerate potential. And an 18-year child can use the money to jumpstart their future. And then it goes back to the beginning. So this is the app that they've launched. I'm on Apple's iOS, but of course it has been launched for Android as well. This is interesting. Because this is the first time the federal government has been able to get involved in Trump accounts and invest for your children's future. And whether you voted for Donald Trump or not, that's irrelevant because he actually cares and his administration cares about your kids' futures. And this is novel for me. It's novel for everyone else that's having a child in this window of time. Now, I do want to get to some of the questions that he answered. Benny Harmony, of course, had a question there about these Trump accounts and about the app and what the app can do in terms of financial literacy. And according to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he said that 38% of Americans have no exposure to equities. And so he believes that this is going to usher in a new era of financial literacy. And I think that's important because even with Julio Gonzalez, who's the president of Rav Espanol and who I interview from time to time, president of Engineered Tax Services, he talks about the importance of financial literacy and how important that is. So the U.S. government will be providing $1,000 as a seed investment. And, Treasury Secretary said he wanted to create a generation of shareholders. This is a very novel, original idea. We've heard of Trump RX. We have heard of Trump IRA that's coming soon. But right now, it's all about the Trump account. Now let's get to some of the bullet points that the Secretary talked about on the economy. This was just at the top of his briefing. He talked about the fact that 33% of taxpayers got higher returns this year. 33%. That's a pretty good number. 44% of taxpayers claimed one of the 4 signature Trump tax benefits. We know there was no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. And of course, GDP, he said, was positive for 4 quarters. Energy dominance, a big theme of the Secretary's speech today. The U.S. is now the largest energy exporter. That's novel as well. That's something to celebrate. Unemployment remains at 4.3%. Average 401k is up almost $30,000. That's incredible as well. Now, on Iran, before we get to this break, which I know is hard, this was interesting. They asked him several times if a deal had been reached, which is what we reported at the top of the show. Scott Bessent did not seem to indicate that had been reached just yet. Of course, he has not seen the president today, so we don't know if there's information that he may not know. The point being is that he didn't want to get ahead of the president. He has not seen the president today, but he's got several red lines. President Trump has several red lines, and he didn't seem to indicate that the 60-day agreement was in place as of the information that he has currently. We'll make sure to stay on top of this. We want to hit a break right now, and we will be back, and hopefully Jack Posobiec will be back at Pebble Beach when we return.
Call this the Jack Posobiec Appreciation Hour. I can say confidently, I think Josh Shapiro would be the vice presidential nominee if it wasn't for Jack Posobiec. And that is, I'll be honest.
And welcome back to Human Events Daily. Just earlier, you saw Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent delivering a press briefing where our very own Jack Posobiec was. He will be out to Pebble Beach in just a moment. But before we went to the break, we were talking about the Iran war and everyone asking Scott Bessent, okay, is there a deal on the table? Is there a deal on the table? Because we've been getting these reports from Axios that a tentative deal had been reached. Now, we're talking about a memorandum of understanding, not a full deal. but just a memorandum that would get the two parties to the table to get Iran to commit to never having a nuclear weapon again. We've been hearing this over and over again, especially from Secretary Rubio. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So we can't really confirm any of that because Scott Bessent didn't seem to indicate that. As soon as we have Jack, we'll be sure to ask him about that. I'm actually curious myself what Jack thinks about that. They asked him if sanctions relief for Iran were on the table, and Scott Bessent simply responded, well, not until the Strait's open. And we know it's so important to get that Strait open for the world economy, for the U.S. economy. It's important. And I thought part of the Axios story was interesting. Okay, I think we're getting Jack now. So, Jack, if we have you, Jack, do we have you? You there?
Hey, Bo, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. So, Jack, we're just talking about the Iran war and the number of reporters in the room that were asking Scott Bessent about this Axios headline that we had at the top of the show, talking about a memorandum of understanding. Each person that asked him, it seemed like he wasn't really prepared to commit to that news that we had. He said he'd not seen the president, so it just seemed he kind of danced around that a bit. Is that because you think he hasn't seen the president today and maybe he's not aware of that information? Or what did you take from that he's not really committing to that?
Well, look, my take on it was that very, very directly that, that Secretary Bessent didn't want to get ahead of the president on that. I've confirmed independently of Axios that the deal is on the president's desk. He is looking at it, that it is not currently signed, although that the president is taking a very strong look at it, but, he's not ready to yet put his name on wet ink in terms of actually finalizing it. But that being said, we're very, very close all the way down to the final details. And I spoke to a senior White House correspondent over the weekend, a senior White House official over the weekend regarding this as well, Saturday and Sunday at length, and was told that one of the reasons that the negotiations take so long is because the Iranians will argue from word to word, and to get a decision out of them almost has to go on paper because of the amount of time it takes to be able to physically get a piece of paper to the supreme leader, because they're keeping him under lock and key because they don't want to give away his location because of what happened to his father. So the process takes a lot of time. So if President Trump, here's what it comes down to in practice. If President Trump wants to change even one word, that could add days to the negotiation.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Well, one thing I took away also from what Bessent said was that the blockade that we have there in the Strait will only be proportional to the traffic that can flow through it. And that seems to make absolute sense to me, because we've had this gridlock at the Strait, and I wouldn't back a single ship out of there until we saw that traffic was free-flowing, which, of course, it hasn't been. What's your take, Jack, on the news over the past, 24 to 48 hours that there have been some skirmishes? We saw that ballistic missile heading for Kuwait that got intercepted. We've knocked some drones down. Does that affect at all the timeline of this memorandum of understanding to get the two parties to the table?
Well, here's what's really interesting, and I got asked about this on an interview I was in last night, and what I believe is going on, again, going back to my conversation on Sunday, is that you do have these different pillars, as Secretary Bessent was describing it just now, of the Iranian government. The IRGC is just one pillar. They're not the clerics. They're not the elected leaders. So what do we see? You've got essentially rogue elements of the government, or rogue elements, in this case, of the Revolutionary Guard, who are conducting these violations of the ceasefire, where they clearly are, but at the same time, that's the military track. The United States Navy has been able to respond to those in tune, and that at the same time, the diplomatic track that the president is on, that the secretary was discussing, obviously the administration in whole is discussing, has not been able to get knocked off of track while those military dust-ups are happening. So do they threaten the ceasefire? Yes, obviously. But they've not been able to knock off the diplomatic track, and that's what's so important. Now, the other piece of this is because Iran, as he said, it's not regime change, but the regime has changed. I've called it regime transition in a sense, similar to Venezuela. And so what the supreme leader has yet to been able to do is take full command of the entire government, of the entire regime, basically, within Iran. I think this is absolutely key to understanding what's going on that we're seeing in the press, that we're seeing in the media, that we're seeing from the military, we're seeing from the world's finest Navy, which is, of course, the United States Navy, keeping it down, but at the same time, the president sticking to that diplomatic plan. And you can see, of course, the United States Marines are standing guard right there. Whenever you see a Marine standing outside the Oval or the West Wing, that means the president is in the Oval Office. He's there right now working on it.
Well, I thought it was so interesting, Jack, because Scott Bessent said, the fact that we're even having a conversation, that Iran is willing to even discuss the end of their nuclear program is unparalleled. I mean, that's an achievement in and of itself, and I think that's to be acknowledged. Something else that I took note of as well, Jack, was, Scott Bessent comes up with some good economic positivity for our country. 33% of taxpayers getting higher returns, 44% claiming one of 4 signature Trump tax benefits, GDP positive for 4 quarters, and he's unveiling the Trump Account app, which I just showed on my phone before you got over here. Didn't hear a lot of questions about the positivity of that.
Well,
Seemed like every question I heard was negative.
Well, Bo, we've got a good friend of both mine and yours who's here who just asked the secretary about the Trump accounts. It's Benny Ray Harmony, former Human Events producer, putting in work now as a White House correspondent. Benny Ray, you asked him, tell us about the question, tell us about what you thought of the secretary's answer.
Well, Jack, my biggest question was a lot of families in America, working class families, normal families, they maybe don't have the financial expertise that these Wall Street types do when it comes to stock markets and investing. I mean, me specifically, it was a question that kind of hit close to me because that's how I am. And so a lot of people you're hearing in the media, people are saying that this is only for wealthy Americans, these Trump accounts, because they're the ones that know how to operate money. And so a lot of the maybe lower class people it confuses them, the financial verbiage. So I asked him about that, and he said that the Trump accounts, specifically the app that they just launched today, it makes it a lot easier. And there's these financial literacy modules on the app that you can go through, and it will help explain investing to you, help explain where your money is going, the S&P, like kind of just all of those things. So if you don't know a lot about finance, it's okay. This app and the Trump accounts can really help you.
Believe it or not, so Tanya Tay back home, that's something, the minute she heard about this, that this was going to be opening up now, because our kids aren't, they're too old to be eligible for the $1,000 capitalization. That's only if you have kids born right now. But anyone under 18 is eligible for the program. So we've got 8 and 5, Jack and AJ. She went, found out that they're both eligible. She's actually signed them up. And folks know Tanya Tay, she manages all the books for the Poso household. Like, I don't look at that stuff because I'm like you. I'm like, I don't do that stuff. I mean, I know enough to be able to talk about it, but I'm like, I just don't go down in the weeds. She does, and she says that it's a great deal. 90 seconds. What did you think? Ultimately, do you think that he got the job done in terms of selling that deal to the American people?
Well, honestly, Jack, not necessarily, but it's because a lot of the press in there didn't want to actually ask questions about these Trump accounts, and it kind of is disappointing because this is such a huge thing. 2025 to 2028, if you have a kid, they get $1,000 in that account, and you can continue to invest for them. So I really wish that the journalists in there would have focused more on that and how this is going to help financial literacy just in America in general. But I think the secretary is doing his best to try to push these things out, and we were at the Trump RX auditorium summit thing that they had just here in D.C., and he talked a lot about that. So I think they'll continue to push this forward, but I do hope that going forward journalists will ask more about finances in America and not necessarily these gotcha questions.
All right, and guys, I don't know if you can see it in the shot, but man, there's that UFC is right there. This thing is massive. It looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. I think it's pretty cool. I don't know, Benny, you trying to go?
I'm trying to go.
I might be trying to go. We'll see. Bo, thanks so much for helping us out today. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.